The whistle of the Union Pacific train pierced the stillness of the Wyoming frontier as it pulled into Evanston's newly constructed station in the spring of 1871. Eliza Fairchild stood on the platform, one hand clutching the handle of her worn leather trunk, the other gripping her father's arm with quiet determination. Her pale blue eyes, though sightless since birth, were turned toward the sounds and smells of her new home: coal smoke, dust, livestock, and the persistent clamor of a town striving to become something more than just another stop along the transcontinental railroad. "It smells different here," Eliza said, her voice soft but steady, "like pine and something earthy, not like Boston at all." Jonathan Fairchild patted his daughter's hand. "That would be the sage, my dear. It grows all over these plains." "The conductor says Evanston's grown considerably since the railroad came through. Nearly 2,000 souls now, and a proper doctor among them." Eliza nodded, not needing to voice what they both knew, that no doctor, frontier or otherwise, would be able to grant her sight. She had made her peace with darkness long ago. At 22, she had learned to navigate her world through sound, touch, smell, and an uncanny sense that some called a gift and others called witchery. She preferred to think of it as listening to the world with her heart rather than her eyes. "Papa, I can manage the trunk," she said, releasing his arm to take hold of her baggage. "You've got your hands full with your medical supplies." "Nonsense. I'll find someone to—" "Pardon me, sir," Jonathan called out. "Might we trouble you for assistance?" Eliza turned her head toward approaching footsteps, heavy boots on wooden planks, a slight unevenness to the gait suggesting either an injury or a habitual swagger. "Dr. Fairchild." A deep voice responded, rough around the edges like stone worn by water. "Station master told me to watch for you." "I'm Garrett Baker, that is. Mayor asked me to escort you to your new place." Eliza felt the stranger's attention shift to her, a tangible thing like a change in air pressure. "This is my daughter, Eliza," her father said proudly. "Eliza, Mr. Baker has come to welcome us to Evanston. Miss Fairchild." The man's voice softened slightly. Eliza extended her hand in the direction of his voice, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. His palm was rough, calloused, but his grip was carefully measured. "Mr. Baker," she acknowledged. "Thank you for your kindness." "Just Garrett is fine," he replied, releasing her hand. "It's no trouble. Got my wagon just outside. Town's eager to have a real doctor. Barber's been pulling teeth and setting bones, but he ain't got your learning." As they walked, Eliza counted steps, memorizing the distance from train to station exit. Garrett spoke little, but she could feel him watching her navigate with her walking stick, a polished piece of hickory that had been her companion since childhood. "Been blind long?" he asked abruptly as he helped her into the wagon. "Garrett," Jonathan scolded, but Eliza smiled. "Since birth, Mr. Baker. I've never known anything different." The wagon shifted as he climbed onto the driver's seat. "Must make things difficult." "Some things," she agreed. "But not as many as you might think." The wagon lurched forward, and Eliza breathed in the new sense of her frontier home, cataloging them in her mind. Horse, leather, dust, and something else, the scent of the man beside her. Sun-baked cotton, tobacco, and a hint of coffee. "You'll find Evanston's growing fast," Garrett said as they traveled. "Railroad brings new folks every day. Got a proper hotel, 3 saloons, couple of mercantiles, even got a schoolhouse now." "And where does Mr. Baker fit into this burgeoning metropolis?" Jonathan asked genially. There was a pause before Garrett answered. "I run cattle mostly. Got a spread about 5 miles out. Come into town for supplies and to help the sheriff when needed." "You're a deputy?" Eliza asked. "No, madam. Just lend a hand when things get rowdy. Sheriff Hollister's getting on in years." The wagon turned, and Eliza felt the quality of the road change beneath the wheels. "This here's Front Street," Garrett informed them. "Your house and office are at the end, near the church. Mayor thought it fitting for the doctor to be near the house of healing for both body and soul." When they finally stopped, Garrett jumped down and came around to help Eliza. As his hands encircled her waist to lift her from the wagon, she felt the strength in them and something else, a momentary tremor, quickly suppressed. "Thank you," she murmured as her feet touched solid ground. "It's a white clapboard with a green door," he told her, and she appreciated that he described it rather than simply pointing. "Got a porch with 3 steps leading up. Path's pretty straight from here." Eliza smiled. "I'll remember that." As her father and Garrett unloaded their trunks, Eliza stood on the threshold of her new home, taking in the sounds of Evanston children playing in the distance, a piano from one of the saloons, the persistent clang of a blacksmith's hammer. "Miss Fairchild," Garrett said, returning to her side. "If you or your father need anything, folks at the Mercantile can point you my way." "That's very kind, Mr. Baker." "Garrett," he corrected, and she heard a smile in his voice. "Welcome to Wyoming territory, Miss Fairchild." "Eliza," she returned, offering her hand again. This time when he took it, his grip lingered a moment longer after he left. Eliza explored her new home, fingers trailing along walls, counting steps between rooms, learning the creaks in the floorboards and the way sound echoed differently in each space. "It's small but sturdy," her father said. "2 bedrooms upstairs, and the front parlor will serve as my examination room. Kitchen's out back." "It's perfect, Papa," she replied, finding a window and opening it to let the spring air in. "It feels hopeful here," Jonathan Fairchild sighed. "I pray it will be, my dear." "After your mother's passing, Boston held too many memories. We needed a fresh start." Eliza nodded, not mentioning the whispers that had followed them, a widowed doctor with a blind daughter, struggling to maintain his practice amid mounting debts. The invitation to become Evanston's physician had been Providence itself. "I'll make dinner," she said, moving confidently toward where she'd identified the kitchen. "And tomorrow I'll learn my way to the Mercantile. We'll need supplies." Her father's footsteps followed her. "Eliza, you don't have to, I do," she interrupted gently. "New town or old, I won't be a burden. I'm quite capable of shopping and keeping house, as you well know." Jonathan sighed. "Very well, but perhaps this Mr. Baker might show you around first. He seems a decent sort." Eliza turned away to hide her smile. "Perhaps, though I suspect a cattle rancher has better things to do than guide a blind woman around town." "Don't underestimate yourself, my dear," her father replied. There was something in the way he looked at you, as if he was seeing something rare and valuable. Eliza felt a strange flutter in her chest, but dismissed it, more likely wondering how I managed not to walk into walls. But later that night, as she lay in her new bedroom listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier town settling into darkness, Eliza found herself remembering the timbre of Garrett Baker's voice and the careful strength of his hands. There had been no pity in his manner, only curiosity, and a directness she found refreshing. In Boston, men had either avoided her or treated her like a delicate piece of china. Garrett Baker had spoken to her as a person. It was a small thing, perhaps, but on this night of new beginnings, it felt significant. The next morning, Eliza woke to the sound of a knock at their front door. She dressed quickly, pinning her chestnut hair into a simple bun, and selecting a blue cotton dress that her mother had once said matched her eyes, a detail that meant little to Eliza, but had always pleased her to remember. She made her way downstairs carefully, having spent part of the previous evening memorizing the 14 steps and the slight warp in the 10th one. "Good morning, Dr. Fairchild," came a now familiar voice as her father opened the door. "Brought some eggs and bread from Mrs. Peterson at the boarding house. Thought you folks might need breakfast before you got your bearings." "How thoughtful," her father replied. "Please come in, Mr. Baker." Garrett's boots sounded on the wooden floor, pausing when he caught sight of Eliza at the bottom of the stairs. "Miss Fairchild," he greeted her. "Hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all," she replied, moving forward with confidence. "And it's Eliza, remember? Thank you for thinking of our breakfast." "Figured it might be a while before you got your pantry stocked," he said, and she heard him set something on what must be a table. "Town council's eager to meet you, Doc. They're gathering at noon at the hotel dining room." "I'll be there," Jonathan assured him. "And you, Miss Eliza," Garrett continued, "I thought you might want to get acquainted with the town. If you're willing, I could show you around this morning." Eliza felt her father's pleased gaze. "That would be most helpful, Mr. Baker, Garrett," he insisted again. After a breakfast of fresh bread, eggs, and coffee that Garrett had brought, Eliza took her father's arm as they stepped out onto the porch. The morning sun warmed her face, and she tilted her head toward it, savoring the sensation. "Beautiful day," Garrett observed, watching her. "Yes," she agreed. "The air feels different here, cleaner somehow. I can smell sage again and something sweet." "Wild roses," Garrett identified. "They grow along the creek this time of year." Eliza smiled. "You have a good nose, sir." "Just spend a lot of time outdoors," he replied, and she heard a shrug in his voice. "Doc, if you're heading to the hotel, it's 4 blocks that way. I'll bring your daughter back here after our tour." Jonathan hesitated. "Eliza, are you certain?" "I'll be fine, Papa," she assured him, releasing his arm and extending her hand toward Garrett. After a moment, he took it and placed it on his forearm. The wool of his coat was rough under her fingers, the muscle beneath it solid. "I promise to deliver her safely," Garrett said, and there was something in his tone that brooked no argument. As they walked, Eliza counted intersections, noted the changing textures beneath her feet from dirt to wooden boardwalks, and cataloged the sounds and smells of each establishment they passed. "Mercantile's here on the left," Garrett narrated. "Run by the Wilsons' good folks, fair prices. Bank's across the street, then the hotel. 3 saloons I'd avoid the Rusty Nail on the south end. Telegraph office is next to the station where we met yesterday." Eliza absorbed it all, building a map in her mind. "And where's the church you mentioned?" "End of Front Street, next to your place." "Methodist. Preacher comes through twice a month." "Do you attend services, Mr. Baker?" There was a pause. "When I'm in town." They continued walking, and Eliza became aware of voices dropping as they passed, conversations stilling then resuming with increased volume. "People are staring, aren't they?" she asked quietly, Garrett's arm tensed under her hand. "New faces are always interesting in a small town." "It's not just that," she said with a small smile. "It's the blind girl and her escort. I'm used to it." He was quiet for a moment. "Doesn't seem to bother you much." "Should it? I can't see their stares, so they can't make me uncomfortable unless I allow it." Garrett made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "That's a particular way of looking at things. I find it works well enough. Though I admit in Boston I seldom ventured out alone. People can be unpredictable when they encounter difference." They had reached what Eliza sensed was an open area, the sounds less confined. "This is the town square," Garrett informed her. "Such as it is. More of a wide spot with a few benches. Ladies' Aid Society is talking about planting trees." "What does it look like?" Eliza asked, genuinely curious. Garrett was silent for a moment. "Never had to describe a view before," he admitted. "It's dusty, packed dirt with some scrubby grass. Buildings all around, mostly false fronts trying to look bigger than they are. Mountains to the north, Big sky overhead, bluer than anything you can imagine. And beyond the town, his voice softened. Open country, miles of sage and grassland rolling all the way to the Uinta Mountains. My ranch is toward the Bear River where the valley widens out. Good grazing land. You love it, Eliza observed, hearing the change in his tone. Never wanted to be anywhere else, he confirmed. My pa brought us west when I was 12. Worked cattle drives till I could buy my own spread 5 years ago. They sat on a bench, and Eliza felt the warmth of the sun on her face again. Tell me about your ranch. She felt his surprise at her interest. Nothing fancy. 2-room cabin, barn, corrals. Running about 500 head of cattle now. Got 3 good hands working for me. No Mrs. Baker to help run things? Eliza asked, then felt her cheeks warm at her own boldness. Garrett cleared his throat. No, madam. Never found the time for courting, I guess. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when the church bell rang the hour. We should get you back, Garrett said, standing and offering his arm again. Your father will be wondering. As they walked back toward her home, Eliza felt a strange reluctance to end their tour. There was something about Garrett Baker that intrigued her, a bluntness tempered with unexpected kindness. Thank you for showing me around, she said as they reached her porch. It helps enormously to build a mental map. How do you do that? He asked. See things in your mind when you've never. Well, seen them, she finished for him. It's difficult to explain. I feel shapes and spaces. I hear how sound bounces differently in open areas versus enclosed ones. Smells tell me what's nearby, the leather from the saddle shop, baking bread from the hotel, tobacco from the saloon. And people, how do you know about them? Eliza smiled. Their voices tell me a great deal, tone, cadence, the words they choose. And there are other things. The way they move, how they breathe, whether they stand close or keep their distance. What do you know about me then? Garrett asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. Eliza tilted her head, considering. You're tall, at least 6 feet, given where your voice comes from. Strong from physical work. You move deliberately, not wasting motion. You're direct in speech but careful with me, not from pity, I think, but from respect. And, she added with a small smile, you're watching me right now, trying to decide if I'm a curiosity or something else entirely. There was a moment of startled silence before Garrett let out a low whistle. That's uncanny, Miss Fairchild. Just observation, she replied. My other senses compensate for what I lack. Well, they do a fine job of it. There was new warmth in his voice. Would it be all right if I called on you again? Town's holding a social on Saturday at the schoolhouse. Might be a good way for you and your father to meet everyone at once. Eliza felt a flutter of pleasure. We'd be delighted. As Garrett took his leave, Eliza stood on the porch listening to his retreating footsteps. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt a spark of excitement about their new life in Evanston. The frontier town might lack the refinements of the East, but it offered something she had rarely found in Boston society, the chance to be known for herself, rather than defined solely by her blindness. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity as Jonathan Fairchild established his medical practice and Eliza set up their household. True to her word, she learned to navigate between their home and the mercantile, the church, and several neighbors' houses. Mrs. Wilson at the mercantile proved especially helpful, describing items and their locations on shelves so that Eliza could return and find them independently. By Saturday evening, Eliza had settled into enough of a routine to feel confident attending the social. She wore her best dress, a sage green poplin with ivory lace at the collar and cuffs, and arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than her usual practical bun. You look lovely, her father said as they prepared to leave. Your mother would be proud to see how well you've adapted to our new circumstances." Eliza smiled, adjusting her collar. "Do you think Mr. Baker will be there tonight?" There was a knowing pause before Jonathan replied. "I expect he will. He's been in town every day this week, which Mrs. Wilson tells me is unusual for him. Typically, he only comes in for supplies once a month." Eliza felt her cheeks warm. Perhaps he has business matters to attend to. Perhaps, her father agreed, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "Shall we go? I believe I hear someone at the door already." It was indeed Garrett, come to escort them to the social. "Evening, Doc," he greeted, then his voice softened. "Miss Fairchild, you look very nice tonight." "Thank you," Eliza replied, detecting a new scent mingled with his usual outdoors aroma bay rum aftershave. "You smell very nice tonight," she returned with a small smile. Garrett's surprised laugh was rich and warm. "Figured I ought to clean up proper for a social, even put on a new shirt." "It suits you," Eliza said, though of course she couldn't see it. But she could imagine the effect of fresh linen and careful grooming on the rugged man she'd come to know through their conversations. The schoolhouse was only a short walk away, but as they approached, Eliza could hear the gathering before they reached it: music from a fiddle and piano, laughter, the steady hum of conversations. "Quite a turnout," Jonathan observed. "Whole town comes to these," Garrett confirmed. "Not much entertainment out here otherwise." As they entered, the noise level dropped momentarily, and Eliza felt the familiar weight of unseen stares. She straightened her shoulders and smiled in the direction of the music. "Dr. Fairchild." A booming voice approached them. "And this must be your daughter. Welcome to Evanston. I'm Mayor Perkins." Introductions flowed as townspeople came to meet the new doctor and his daughter. Eliza shook countless hands, matching voices to names and constructing an intricate web of relationships in her mind. Mrs. Perkins, the mayor's wife, who smelled of lavender water. Mr. Thompson, the banker, whose handshake was brief and moist. Mrs. Wilson from the mercantile, whose warm embrace included a whispered, "So glad to see you out, dear." Through it all, Garrett remained at her side, occasionally supplying a name or relationship when introductions became confusing. His steady presence anchored her in the swirl of new voices and unfamiliar surroundings. "Would you care to dance?" he asked after the initial rush of greetings subsided. Eliza hesitated. "I'm not sure. That is, I haven't danced much since coming west," he supplied smoothly, not mentioning her blindness. "It's just a simple waltz. I promise not to step on your toes if you'll grant me the same courtesy." She laughed, tension broken. "In that case, I accept." Garrett led her to what must be the dance floor, placing one of her hands on his shoulder and taking the other in his. His other hand rested lightly at her waist, and then they were moving to the music's gentle rhythm. "You dance well," she observed after a few turns, surprised by his grace. "My mother insisted," he replied. "Said no son of hers would clod around a dance floor like a stampeding steer. Wise woman. She was." The past tense told its own story, but Eliza didn't press. They moved together with increasing confidence, and Eliza found herself relaxing into the dance, trusting Garrett's lead completely. It had been years since she'd danced, not since her coming out ball in Boston, where well-meaning young men had treated her like spun glass. "Everyone's watching us," Garrett murmured after a while. "Does that bother you?" she asked. "No, they're just surprised." "At what?" he hesitated. "At seeing Garrett Baker dancing, for one thing. I don't usually participate much at these gatherings. And for another." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "At how well you dance. I think they expected me to be dragging you around the floor, not the other way around." Eliza laughed. "We make a good team, then." When the music ended, Garrett led her to where refreshments were being served. They spent the rest of the evening together, sometimes dancing, sometimes sitting and talking as he described the people around them and their stories. Sheriff Hollister over there lost his right thumb in the war, he told her. Mrs. Davies with the high laugh runs the boarding house and makes the best apple pies in the territory. Thompson the banker is sweet on the schoolteacher, Miss Clark, but she won't give him the time of day. Eliza absorbed it all, adding texture and depth to her mental picture of Evanston. "And what about you?" she asked eventually. "What do people say about Garrett Baker when he's not around?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "That I keep to myself, that I'm fair in business but hard in a fight, that I don't take to strangers easy." "Yet here you are, spending your evening with the newest strangers in town," she observed. "Here I am," he agreed softly. Later, as they walked home under a star-filled sky that Eliza could feel but not see, Garrett described the constellations to her. "The Big Dipper's right overhead," he said. "And over there's Cassiopeia looks like a W made of stars." "How did you learn the stars?" she asked. "Trail drives," he answered. "Used to navigate by them when moving cattle. My pa taught me when I was a boy." When they reached the Fairchild home, Jonathan excused himself to go inside, leaving Eliza and Garrett alone on the porch. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "I haven't enjoyed an evening so much in a very long time." "Nor have I," he admitted. "Would you? That is, I was thinking of riding into town for church tomorrow. Could I call for you and your father?" "We'd like that," she replied, pleased by the invitation. There was a moment of silence filled with unspoken words. Then Garrett cleared his throat. "Well, good night then, Miss Fairchild." "Good night, Mr. Baker." As she turned to go inside, she felt his hand touch hers briefly, just the lightest brush of fingers, but it sent a curious warmth through her that lingered long after she'd prepared for bed. In the darkness of her room, a darkness no different from her daylight hours, Eliza reflected on the enigmatic Garrett Baker. There was a story there, in his careful words and measured reactions. A man who kept to himself, yet had taken such pains to welcome them and introduce her to the town. A hard man, by his own admission, who danced with unexpected grace and described the stars with quiet poetry. As she drifted to sleep, Eliza realized she was doing something dangerous. She was forming a picture of Garrett Baker in her mind, constructed not from sight but from 100 small details. The timbre of his voice, the strength in his hands, the careful way he answered difficult questions, the scent of horses and leather and open spaces that clung to him. It was a picture that appealed to her far more than it should after such a short acquaintance. Sunday morning dawned bright, according to her father, who had developed the habit of describing the weather to Eliza each day. They dressed in their church clothes, and precisely at 9 o'clock, a knock came at their door. The church service was simple but heartfelt, with a visiting minister delivering a sermon on community and fellowship. Eliza sat between her father and Garrett, acutely aware of the latter's presence beside her, especially when they stood to sing hymns, and his deep voice joined the congregation. After the service, many parishioners stopped to speak with Dr. Fairchild about various ailments or to welcome Eliza again. She noticed that fewer approached Garrett directly, though many greeted him respectfully. "Would you care to join us for Sunday dinner?" Jonathan asked Garrett as they left the church. "Eliza has prepared a roast." Eliza felt Garrett's hesitation. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition," she assured him. "There's plenty." "Then I'd be honored," he replied. Their Sunday dinner was a pleasant affair, with conversation flowing easily among the three of them. Eliza served confidently, having memorized the placement of dishes and practiced the route from kitchen to dining room. "This is delicious," Garrett complimented her. "Didn't expect such a fine meal." "Did you think blind women couldn't cook?" she teased gently. "No, madam," he replied seriously. "Just didn't expect a Boston lady to be so handy in the kitchen." Eliza laughed. "My mother believed that all women should know how to run a household, regardless of their circumstances. She adapted her teachings to accommodate my blindness, but insisted I learn nonetheless." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was, Eliza agreed, a familiar pang of loss touching her heart. "Influenza took her last winter," Jonathan explained quietly. "It was a difficult time." "I'm sorry," Garrett said, and Eliza heard genuine sympathy in his voice. "Lost my own ma to mountain fever when I was 16. Pa followed 5 years later thrown from a horse." "So you've been on your own a long while," Eliza observed. "Yes, madam. Makes a man self-sufficient, I suppose." After dinner, Jonathan excused himself to answer a medical call, leaving Eliza and Garrett alone. They sat on the porch, enjoying the afternoon warmth. "Tell me about your cattle," Eliza prompted. "You mentioned 500 head." 523, to be exact," Garrett replied. And she could hear the pride in his voice as he launched into details of his operation, the Hereford bulls he'd brought in to improve his stock, the spring calving, the challenges of winter feeding. "You should visit sometime," he said suddenly. "The ranch, I mean, if you'd like to." The invitation surprised her. "I'd enjoy that," she replied honestly, "though I'm not much of a horsewoman. We could take the buggy," he suggested. "It's comfortable enough for the ride." "Then yes, I'd like that very much." As spring turned to summer, Eliza and her father settled fully into life in Evanston. Jonathan's medical practice flourished, with patients coming from as far as 30 miles away. Eliza established herself as a capable housekeeper and became involved with the Ladies' Aid Society, where her quick mind and education made her a valuable member despite her blindness. And Garrett Baker became a regular visitor to the Fairchild home. What had begun as courtesy calls evolved into a genuine friendship, and Eliza admitted to herself something more. He came to town far more frequently than his ranch business required, often bearing small gifts. Fresh berries picked along the river, a particularly smooth piece of river stone he thought she might like to touch, wildflowers he described in careful detail as he presented them. In late June, he finally made good on his promise to show her his ranch. Jonathan was initially reluctant to allow Eliza to travel unchaperoned, but Garrett's reputation for integrity and the obvious respect with which he treated Eliza eventually convinced him. The journey took nearly 2 hours by buggy, and Garrett narrated the landscape as they traveled. "River's about a quarter mile to our right now," he told her. "You can probably hear it. We had good snowmelt this year, so it's running high. Left side is open range with sage and bunch grass. Cattle are grazing about a half-mile off black dots against the green this time of year." Eliza closed her eyes, a meaningless gesture to others, but one that helped her concentrate on her other senses. She could indeed hear the river, a constant rushing murmur beneath the buggy's creaks and the horse's steady hoof beats. The air smelled different here, cleaner, with complex layers of grass, water, and something sharper that might be pine from distant mountains. "It smells wonderful," she said. "So alive." Garrett made a sound of agreement. "Never gets old. Been here 8 years now and still stop sometimes just to look and breathe it all in." When they finally arrived at the ranch, Eliza was surprised by how quiet it seemed. "Hands are out moving the herd to summer pasture," Garrett explained as he helped her down from the buggy. "Just old Pete here today, keeping an eye on things." "Miss Fairchild," a creaky voice greeted her. "Boss has been talking about bringing you out for weeks now. Welcome to the B Bar." "Thank you, Mr. Pete," Eliza replied, extending her hand. "Just Pete, miss." the old man corrected, taking her hand briefly. Been riding with the boss since he started. Never thought I'd see him bring a lady out here, though. Pete, Garrett said, warning in his tone. Just saying it's a nice change is all, the old cowhand replied, unrepentant. Lunch is ready whenever you are. Garrett showed Eliza around the ranch headquarters, guiding her carefully over the uneven ground and describing everything in detail. Main house is right in front of us, logs chinked with mud and lime. One story with a porch across the front. Barns to the left, corrals beyond that. Bunkhouse for the hands is over to the right. He led her onto the porch and then inside. It's plain, he warned. Bachelor quarters. But Eliza found it charming as she explored with her hands solid furniture, simple but well-made, wool rugs on plank floors, a stone fireplace that anchored the main room. You built this? She asked, running her fingers along a wooden mantel. Most of it, he confirmed. Had help with the raising, but did the finishing work myself over winters. It's beautiful, she said sincerely. I can feel the care that went into it. After a simple but hearty lunch prepared by old Pete, Garrett took Eliza down to the river. They sat on a fallen log as he described the landscape in detail, the way the river curved, the cottonwoods lining its banks, the distant mountains visible on clear days. I wish you could see it, he said suddenly. I can, she replied softly. Through you. Your words paint pictures I can understand. It's not the same. No, she agreed. But it's enough. More than enough. There was a long moment of silence, filled only by the river's constant murmur and the rustle of leaves overhead. Eliza, Garrett said finally, her name sounding different somehow in his voice. I've never met anyone like you. Nor I you, she replied, heart quickening. I'm not good with fancy words, he continued, but these past months, getting to know you, it's changed something in me. Eliza turned toward him, feeling the warmth of his gaze on her face. Changed what? How I see things. Everything, really. He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. You notice things I've taken for granted all my life. The way water sounds different in spring than summer. How wind in pine trees sounds like the ocean, the smell of sage after rain. You've always seen these things, she said. You just didn't have names for them before. Maybe, he conceded. Or maybe I needed someone who sees with her heart to teach me how to really look. Eliza's breath caught. No one had ever understood so perfectly how she experienced the world. Garrett, she began, but then his hand was touching her cheek, turning her face gently toward his. May I? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. She nodded, and then his lips met hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. His hand cradled her face as if she were made of porcelain, but his lips spoke of deeper feelings, carefully contained. When they parted, Eliza kept her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. I've wanted you to do that for some time, she admitted. His laugh was soft and wondering. Have you now? And here I thought I was being so careful, not presuming too much. Too careful, she teased. I was beginning to wonder if you would ever get around to it. Garrett drew her closer, his arms encircling her waist. Miss Fairchild, are you suggesting I've been too much of a gentleman? Perhaps a little, she replied, smiling up at where she knew his face must be, though I appreciate the respect it showed. Your father might have something to say about this, he said after a moment. My father has been waiting for you to speak up for weeks, she countered. He's quite fond of you, you know, and I of him, Garrett said, but it's his daughter I've fallen in love with. The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Eliza felt them settle into her heart, filling spaces she hadn't known were empty. I love you too, she said, the words coming easily. Though we've known each other such a short time. Time enough, he replied. Out here, you learn to recognize the real thing when you find it. They returned to the house hand in hand. where old Pete took one look at them and grinned knowingly. The ride back to town was different, somehow the same landscape, but transformed by the knowledge that they had crossed a threshold together. Garrett spoke formally to Jonathan that evening, requesting permission to court Eliza properly. Her father gave his blessing without hesitation, having seen the positive effect each had on the other. Summer passed in a golden haze for Eliza. Garrett came to town several times a week, and they established a routine: walks through town, Sunday dinners, occasional picnics by the river. He took her to his ranch again, this time introducing her to all his hands and showing her more of his land. She learned to identify his horse's particular gait, could distinguish his footsteps from others on the boardwalk, knew without being told when he entered a room by the way conversations changed, and the air seemed to shift around her. In August, an incident occurred that cemented their relationship in the eyes of the town. Eliza was walking alone to the Mercantile, a route she knew well, when she encountered a group of drovers passing through town. Unaware of her blindness, one made a crude remark and blocked her path. "Excuse me," she said firmly, trying to step around him. "No need to hurry, pretty lady," the man replied, his breath heavy with whiskey despite the early hour. "Why don't you spend some time with me and my friends? We got money to spend." "Please let me pass," Eliza said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. The man grabbed her arm. "Come on now, don't be unfriendly." "The lady asked you to move," came Garrett's voice, cold and hard in a way Eliza had never heard before. The drover laughed. "This your girl?" She didn't mention having the sound of a fist connecting with flesh cut off his words, followed by a heavy thud as the man hit the ground. There was a moment of tense silence, then the shuffle of boots as the other drovers apparently backed away. "Anyone else have something to say?" Garrett asked, his voice deadly quiet. Muttered denials and retreating footsteps answered him. Then Garrett was at Eliza's side, his hand gentle on her arm despite the violence of moments before. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern replacing anger. "Yes," she assured him, though she was trembling slightly. "Thank you for intervening." His arm went around her shoulders. "Let's get you home." Word of the incident spread quickly through Evanston. Some gossiped about the ferocity of Garrett's response. He had apparently knocked the much larger drover unconscious with a single blow, but most approved of his defense of Eliza. What might have been seen as excessive in another context was considered appropriate given her vulnerability. That evening, as they sat on the Fairchild porch, Eliza brought up the subject. "You have a reputation as a hard man," she said. "I heard Mrs. Wilson telling her husband that no one was surprised by what you did today, given your history." Garrett was silent for a long moment. "There are things in my past I'm not proud of," he finally said. "Had to fight to establish myself when I first came here. Some men take advantage if they sense weakness." "Tell me," she urged gently. "I want to know all of you, not just the parts you choose to show." He sighed heavily. "Was in a few bad scrapes before I got my ranch. Bar fights mostly. Then there was trouble with cattle rustlers 4 years back. 3 men tried to take a dozen of my best cows. I caught them and it ended badly." "Badly how?" 2 ran. 1 pulled a gun. I was faster." His voice was flat, emotionless. Sheriff ruled it self-defense, but some folks have long memories. Eliza reached for his hand, finding it clenched into a fist. "I'm sorry you had to face that." His fingers relaxed under hers. "Doesn't bother you, knowing I've killed a man?" "To protect what was yours. No," she said honestly. "Though I'm sorry for the weight you've had to carry because of it." Garrett's other hand came up to touch her cheek. "You're something special, Eliza Fairchild. Most women would be reconsidering their association with me right about now." "I'm not most women," she reminded him with a small smile. And I don't judge you by what others say or by actions taken in extremity. I know your heart, Garrett Baker. The next day, Garrett rode out early to his ranch to attend to business, promising to return within the week. But 3 days later, a severe summer storm swept through the region, bringing flash floods that washed out bridges and made travel dangerous. Eliza tried not to worry, knowing Garrett was experienced in frontier conditions. But as days passed with no word, anxiety gnawed at her. News trickled in of ranches isolated by floodwaters, livestock drowned, and homesteads damaged. A week after his departure, Eliza was helping in her father's office. She had become adept at rolling bandages and organizing supplies by touch when the door burst open. "Doc," came a breathless voice she recognized as one of Garrett's ranch hands. "You're needed at the B-bar. Boss is hurt bad." Jonathan was already gathering his medical bag. "What happened?" Flash flood caught him checking the north pasture. Horse spooked and threw him down a ravine. "We found him this morning, broke his leg for sure, maybe ribs too. He's burning with fever." Eliza felt her heart constrict. "I'm coming with you." "Eliza," her father began. "I'm coming," she repeated firmly. "You may need assistance and I can help with nursing care." The ranch hand Jim, she remembered, hesitated. "Trail's rough, Miss Fairchild. Bridges out, we're crossing at the shallow ford." "I'll manage," she insisted, already gathering supplies she knew her father would need. The journey to the B-bar was harrowing. They traveled by wagon over muddy roads that had been partially washed away in places. Twice they had to stop to clear debris, and the ford crossing was tense, with water reaching the wagon bed. Throughout it all, Eliza maintained a calm exterior despite her inner turmoil. When they finally reached the ranch, she could sense the atmosphere of worry before anyone spoke. Old Pete met them at the door. "He's in a bad way, Doc," the old man said without preamble. "Delirious most of the time. Legs a mess." Jonathan took charge immediately, directing the hands to bring hot water and clean linens. Eliza followed him into Garrett's bedroom, steeling herself for what she would encounter. The smell hit her first sweat and illness, with an underlying metallic tang of blood. Then came Garrett's voice, murmuring incoherently, his usual strong tones replaced by something weak and pained. "Compound fracture of the right femur," her father reported clinically as he examined his patient. "3 broken ribs. Numerous lacerations, some infected. High fever likely from the infections." Eliza moved to the bedside, finding Garrett's hand and taking it in hers. It was burning hot, the fingers twitching restlessly. "Can you help him?" she asked quietly. "I'll do everything I can," Jonathan promised, "but the leg is my greatest concern. The bone has pierced the skin and there's significant contamination. If infection reaches the bone itself." He didn't need to finish. Eliza knew the worst outcome: amputation if he survived at all. For the next 3 days, Eliza hardly left Garrett's side. She bathed his fevered body with cool cloths, spooned broth between his cracked lips when he was lucid enough to swallow, and changed bandages under her father's direction. Her blindness, so often seen as a disadvantage, became an asset in the darkened sickroom where she moved confidently while others stumbled. On the 3rd night, Garrett's fever peaked. He thrashed in delirium, calling out to people Eliza didn't know, his parents, friends long gone, names from his past. Her father's face was grim when he checked the leg wound. "The infection is spreading," he said quietly. "If his fever doesn't break by morning, I'll have no choice but to amputate." Eliza nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. "Leave us for a while," she requested. "Get some rest. I'll call if there's any change." When Jonathan had gone, Eliza sat beside Garrett's bed and took his hand again. "You listen to me, Garrett Baker," she said, her voice low but fierce. You are not going to die, and you are not going to lose this leg. You're the strongest, most stubborn man I know, and I expect you to fight." She talked through the night, sometimes reminiscing about their time together, sometimes scolding him for his carelessness, sometimes simply describing the future she imagined for them. When words failed, she sang softly hymns her mother had taught her, lullabies she remembered from childhood. Near dawn, Garrett's restless movements stilled. For one terrible moment, Eliza feared the worst, but then she felt the change in his skin, the burning heat beginning to recede, his breathing becoming deeper and more regular. "Father," she called, joy surging through her. "Come quickly." Jonathan confirmed what she already knew: the fever had broken. The crisis had passed. Garrett would likely keep his leg, though recovery would be long and painful. He woke properly later that day, weak but lucid. "Eliza," he murmured when she touched his face. "I'm here," she assured him. "You're going to be fine." His hand fumbled for hers. "Heard you," he said, his voice raspy. "While I was away, heard you talking, calling me back." Tears pricked her eyes again, but this time from relief. "You had me worried, Mr. Baker. Sorry about that." His fingers tightened weakly around hers. "Not my best idea, riding out alone in flood season." "No," she agreed. "Not your best at all." Recovery was slow. Garrett's leg had been severely damaged, and even with Jonathan's skilled care, it was clear he would always walk with a slight limp. For a man who had lived his life in the saddle, it was a difficult adjustment, but Eliza's constant presence helped him through the darkest moments. She stayed at the ranch throughout his convalescence, her father riding out regularly to check on his patient. The arrangement raised a few eyebrows in town, but old Pete's presence as chaperone and the seriousness of Garrett's condition made it acceptable even to the more conservative elements of Evanston society. As summer turned to fall, Garrett regained his strength. Eliza taught him patience during the frustrating process of learning to walk again, first with crutches, then with a cane, and finally unassisted despite the pain that sometimes made him grit his teeth. "I don't know how you do it," he said one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset, or rather, as he watched and described it to her. "Face each day with such courage, knowing some things won't ever change." Eliza considered his words. "When you've never known anything different, you don't waste time wishing for what can't be. You find joy in what is." "Wise words," he said, taking her hand. "I'm trying to learn them. Besides," she added with a smile, "some things do change, sometimes for the better." As if to prove her point, Garrett slowly lowered himself to one knee before her, wincing slightly at the movement. "I had planned something more romantic," he said, "but nearly dying has a way of clarifying what's important." Eliza's heart began to race. "Garrett." "Eliza Fairchild," he said, his voice steady now with certainty. "You've taught me to see the world through new eyes, to appreciate beauty I never noticed before. You've brought light into my life in ways I never imagined possible. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Joy bubbled up inside her like a spring. "Yes," she said simply. "With all my heart, yes." Their wedding took place in October, when the mountains were aflame with autumn colors Eliza couldn't see but could imagine through Garrett's vivid descriptions. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, held in the little Methodist church, with Jonathan giving his daughter away and old Pete standing up as Garrett's best man. Eliza wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered by Mrs. Wilson and the Ladies' Aid Society. In her dark world, she had never cared much about appearance, but on this day she wanted to be beautiful for Garrett. "You are," he whispered when she appeared on her father's arm, "the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." The minister spoke of partnership, of seeing with the heart rather than the eyes, of the strength found in joining two lives as one. When Eliza and Garrett spoke their vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the church, even among the rough cowhands who had come in from the ranch for the occasion. The reception at the hotel dining room afterward was the social event of the season. Eliza danced with her father, then with Garrett, moving confidently in her husband's arms as if they had been dancing together all their lives. "Happy, Mrs. Baker?" Garrett asked as they swayed to the music. "Completely," she replied, lifting her face to his. "And you, Mr. Baker?" "More than I ever thought possible," he said, bending to kiss her briefly. They made their home at the B Bar, with Jonathan visiting often. Garrett expanded the main house, adding rooms and comforts with Eliza's needs in mind, smooth paths between buildings, railings where needed, furniture arranged to create clear pathways. She learned the layout quickly, soon moving about as confidently as she had in town. Winter came early that year, with heavy snows isolating the ranch for weeks at a time. But inside their home, Eliza and Garrett created warmth that defied the Wyoming cold. She established her domain in the kitchen and household, while he managed the ranch operations, though his injury meant he relied more heavily on his hands than before. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire, sometimes reading aloud. Garrett had discovered a love of books through Eliza's collection, sometimes simply talking about their days. He described the winter landscape to her in exquisite detail, and she taught him to hear the different voices of the wind, to identify birds by their calls, to feel the approaching change of weather in the air pressure against his skin. "I never really saw the world before you," he told her one night as they lay together in their bedroom. "Just looked at it without seeing." Eliza traced the contours of his face with her fingertips, a habit she had developed to see his expressions. "And I never fully experienced it until you gave me your eyes," she replied. "We complete each other." Spring brought new life to the ranch, calves in the pastures, wildflowers on the hillsides, and the news that Eliza was expecting their first child. "A baby," Garrett breathed when she told him, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Are you certain? Your father confirmed it yesterday," she said, smiling at his wonder. "Come November there will be 3 of us." His arms encircled her. "I never thought to have a family of my own," he admitted. "After my parents died, I figured I'd live out my days alone on this ranch. And now I can't imagine any other life than this one with you, with our child." As Eliza's pregnancy progressed, she blossomed. The morning sickness passed quickly, and she moved about their home with a new radiance that everyone remarked upon. Garrett hovered protective at first, until she firmly reminded him that generations of women had managed pregnancy without being treated like invalids. "Besides," she told him with a laugh, "I've been navigating the world without sight my entire life. A changing center of balance is just one more adaptation." Jonathan visited regularly to check on his daughter and coming grandchild. He had established a successful practice in Evanston, but was already making plans to transfer more of his work to a younger doctor so he could spend time with his grandchild. "You want a boy or a girl?" Eliza asked Garrett one evening as they sat on the porch, his hand resting on her growing belly. "Healthy," he replied immediately. "That's all that matters." "But if you could choose," he was quiet for a moment. "A little girl," he finally admitted, "with her mother's spirit and wisdom." Eliza smiled. "I was thinking a boy with his father's strength and kindness." "Either way," Garrett said, kissing her temple, "the child will be loved beyond measure." In late October, earlier than expected, Eliza went into labor during a fierce early blizzard. Jonathan was in town, and the ranch hands couldn't get through to fetch him. Garrett sent old Pete to try while he remained with Eliza, trying to hide his terror behind a calm facade. "It's too soon," he said, holding her hand as another contraction seized her. "Only by a few weeks," she gasped when it passed. "The baby will be fine." Hours passed with no sign of the doctor. Eliza's labor progressed rapidly, her calm instructions guiding Garrett through the process despite his panic. "You can do this," she told him between contractions. "Women have been giving birth since the beginning of time." "Usually with midwives or doctors," he countered, but he followed her directions, gathering clean linens, heating water, positioning her as she requested. When the moment came, Eliza was the one who maintained composure, coaching Garrett through the delivery of their son, a tiny but perfect boy with a lusty cry that filled the bedroom. "He's beautiful," Garrett told her as he placed the swaddled infant in her arms. "Dark hair like yours, strong hands like a rancher's son should have." Eliza traced her son's features with gentle fingers, seeing him in her own way. "He's perfect," she agreed, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. They named him Jonathan Garrett Baker, honoring both their fathers. When the elder Jonathan finally arrived the next day, having battled through the storm once it abated, he pronounced both mother and child healthy despite the early arrival and unorthodox delivery. "You did well," he told Garrett, clapping him on the shoulder. "Not many men could have managed what you did." Garrett shook his head. "It was Eliza. She knew exactly what to do, talked me through it all, never panicked once." Jonathan smiled. "She's always been remarkable that way." Life settled into a new rhythm with little JG, as they came to call him, at the center of their world. Garrett took to fatherhood with surprising ease, never hesitating to change diapers or walk a colicky baby when Eliza needed rest. She, in turn, developed an infant care system adapted to her blindness, different textured cloths for different purposes, bottles and jars arranged in specific orders, a bell sewn onto JG's clothing once he became mobile so she could track his movements. Spring brought another change to the B-bar when Jonathan Fairchild, having transferred his practice to a younger doctor, moved permanently to the ranch. Garrett built him a small cabin near the main house, giving the elder man independence while keeping him close to his family. "I never imagined this life," Jonathan confessed to Eliza as they sat watching JG take his first tottering steps toward Garrett's outstretched hands. "When your mother died, I thought our best days were behind us." "And now?" Eliza asked, hearing the smile in her father's voice. "Now I know better. There are always new beginnings if we're brave enough to embrace them." As JG grew from infant to toddler to young boy, it became clear he had inherited his father's sturdy build and his mother's quick intelligence. What surprised them both was his extraordinary empathy, the way he instinctively guided Eliza by describing things she couldn't see, his gentle handling of injured animals, his ability to sense when someone was troubled. "He sees with his heart," Garrett observed when JG was 4, watching their son carefully explain to a new ranch hand how to speak to Eliza so she would know where he was standing. Just like his mother. 2 years later, Eliza gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Garrett's mother. Unlike her brother's dramatic early arrival, Sarah came into the world peacefully, with Jonathan attending and Garrett holding Eliza's hand throughout. "Red hair," Garrett announced in wonder as he cradled his newborn daughter. "Must be from your mother's side, Eliza. She's tiny but fierce, already gripping my finger like she means to hold on forever." As their family grew, so did the ranch. Garrett's innovative breeding programs and fair business practices had made the B-bar one of the most successful operations in the region. They were able to build a new, larger house with modern conveniences that made Eliza's life easier while maintaining the charm of the original homestead. Garrett's leg continued to trouble him in cold weather, but he rarely complained. "A small price to pay," he would say whenever Eliza expressed concern, "for the life I found because of it." He had indeed found a different life than the solitary existence he had once imagined. The hard man known for keeping to himself had become a respected community leader, hosting neighborhood gatherings, contributing generously to the church and school, serving on the town council when needed. And always, through every season, Eliza remained the heart of their home. Her blindness, once seen by others as a limitation, had instead opened their family to a richer experience of the world. She taught her children to identify birds by their songs, to feel approaching weather changes, to describe what they saw with precision and poetry so that she could share their experiences. In turn, Garrett continued the practice of being her eyes, describing sunsets and starry skies, the changing seasons, the growth of their children. "Your son has your smile," he would tell her. "Your daughter has your determination. You should see her face when she's made up her mind about something." 10 years after their wedding, as they celebrated with family and friends gathered at the ranch, Garrett took Eliza aside for a private moment. "I have something for you," he said, placing a small package in her hands. Eliza unwrapped it carefully, her sensitive fingers discovering a wooden box. Inside, she found a pendant on a chain. "It's a locket," Garrett explained. "Silver, with our initials engraved on the front. Inside are locks of hair from JG and Sarah." "I know you can't see it, but it's beautiful," she interrupted, her fingers tracing the intricate engraving. "I can see it through your description and my touch. It's perfect, Garrett." He fastened it around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin. "I wanted to give you something to mark the occasion, something to remind you of the family we've built together." Eliza touched the locket, then reached up to trace her husband's face, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper now, the stubble on his jaw flecked with gray. "I don't need reminders," she said softly. "Every day I wake to the sounds of our children, the feel of your hand in mine, the home we've created together. I may not see with my eyes, but I've never seen more clearly than I do with you." Garrett drew her close, his arms as strong and sure as they had been a decade earlier. "You taught me to see the world as it really is," he murmured against her hair. "Not just to look, but to truly see. It was me who was blind before I met you, Eliza." Around them, the sounds of their celebration continued, children laughing, friends talking, music playing. The sun was setting over the Bear River Valley, painting the sky in colors Eliza would never see but could imagine perfectly through years of Garrett's loving descriptions. "You ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Marrying a blind woman, taking on the challenges that came with that choice?" Garrett's answer was immediate and certain. "Not for a single moment. You've given me eyes to see beauty I never noticed before, ears to hear music in the everyday sounds of life, hands that know how to touch with tenderness instead of strength alone." He turned her face up to his. "You were blind from birth, but saw with your heart. I was the one who needed to learn to see the world through you." As they rejoined their guests, Eliza carried his words with her like a treasure. Their journey together had not always been easy, the challenges of ranch life, the adaptations needed for her blindness, the ordinary struggles of building a family in the frontier West. But through it all, they had found a way to see the world together, his eyes and her heart creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. And in the years that followed, as their children grew and their ranch flourished, as Evanston transformed from frontier outpost to established town, Garrett and Eliza Baker remained at the heart of their community, a reminder that true vision comes not from the eyes but from the soul, and that love, when it finds fertile ground, can transform how we see everything around us.